Sea otters were almost hunted to extinction, which would have led to the decimation of entire marine life ecosystems and further untold consequences. Too little sea otters and the sea urchins would run unchecked, eating all the kelp, embayments, and estuaries in their path. Unfortunately, this is exactly what happened along the coasts of Oregon to Alaska. When Western settlers arrived to the Americas, they were kind of like, this is actually really cold. Thus, the sea otter fur trade began in the 1700s. Their population was estimated to be at the 300,000 mark in the 18th and 19th century, which dropped down to 2,000 by the early 1900s, which ultimately led to kelp forests and all marine life that depends on it to disappear. To help the sea otters come back from near extinction, we had to do a couple of major things. An international ban on hunting sea otters was first implemented in 1911, with the hope being for sea otter populations to bounce back to healthy levels and continue their role as a keystone species. Hey, what's a keystone species? I'm glad you asked, other me. A keystone species can be defined as a species on which other species in an ecosystem largely depend upon, such that if it were removed, the ecosystem would change drastically. The sea otter, therefore, is a critical keystone species as it keeps sea urchins, the main predator of kelp, in check. Many kelp forests are the very foundations for entire offshore ecosystems, where a huge array of fish reproduce and live, and so many other creatures such as crabs, starfish, mussels, sea lions, and even gray whales use for food and shelter. The ban, designed to manage the commercial harvest of fur-bearing mammals such as northern fur seals and sea otters, in large parts of the Bering Sea and the coasts of North America. It actually was the first international treaty of this scope to address wildlife issues. This initiative significantly boosted sea otter populations, now protected by hunting bans in most areas. Prior to Western settlers, indigenous communities did hunt sea otters in a sustainable way for thousands of years. Sea otters bolster kelp forests but can deplete resources for human populations. Some indigenous communities rightfully rely on sea otter hunting for ecosystem balance. The reintroduction of sea otters and subsequent bans have impacted communities like Hesquiat Harbor. Diane Ignace, a resident since 1975, notes the depletion of resources, particularly clams. Indigenous communities historically practiced sustainable sea otter hunting for resource stewardship. Western settlers' impact led to today's challenges. Empowering indigenous voices in ecosystem management is vital for their well-being and land stewardship. Secondly, we needed to actively participate in sea otter conservation efforts in order to help them flourish. According to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, the last verified sea otter on BC's coast was shot near Kielquot in 1929. Therefore, the Department of Fisheries in Canada translocated 89 sea otters from Amchitka and Prince William Sound, Alaska, to Check-Lesklet Bay on the west coast of Vancouver Island between 1969 and 1972. The numbers have since repopulated to a total of 8,110 sea otters, according to a range-wide survey of the BC coast in 2017. Like the Takahe conservation efforts in Australia, long-term and active conservation efforts can make a huge difference in helping wildlife species thrive once again, which will directly impact how healthy an ecosystem can and should be. With those two initiatives and a collection of so many more, sea otters have been able to come back from their dwindling numbers of 2,000. The next step in helping sea otters is to stop habitat loss and reverse it. We need to continue our awareness and above all our action to stop and reverse pollutants from entering our oceans and water bodies. These pollutants, like oil spills, lead to death for many species through ocean acidification. Clams and mussels, a big food source for sea otters, are unable to grow or repopulate in areas of high acidification, which means less survival rates for sea otters, which means more sea urchins. Do what you can by lessening pollutants you might be putting into waterways, and using your consumer purchaser power to help brands that do not harm the environment, or at least do a little bit better. This next effort may not be for everyone, but if you're adventurous and you like seafood, consider eating sea urchins. As more chefs and restaurants provide more sustainably friendly foods, the sea urchin is a good one because it can help protect kelp forests. And there's a lot of them. Beyond this, do your part by trying to support sustainable fishing practices. Now, I do want to say I feel like I've been hating on sea urchins this entire video. Personally, I think they're a very cool creature. They come in all different sorts of sizes, colors, and they have these really big spikes. And they're just kind of doing their thing. They're just being urchin-y. It's not their fault that they were left unchecked for so long because of the decline of sea otters, which is on us. I just want to say, don't hate the player, hate the game. And finally, the last thing you can do is to check out your local charities, see if there's anyone that's supporting sea otters directly, or if there's any organizations which are cleaning up oil spills which can be detrimental to sea otters and every other marine creature as well. If we do all of this, we can help save sea otters and help normalize their levels to healthy numbers where kelp forests and sea urchins alike can live in a healthy balance. Not only would marine life be saved and be able to flourish, establishing a healthy ecosystem for us to use for our own needs like nutrition and tourism as well, but it would also help us with a major climate change goal, sequestering carbon. By maintaining healthy kelp forests, sea otters are also indirectly helping to reduce levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide, a prevalent greenhouse gas, as kelp absorbs and sequesters carbon. Healthy sea otter numbers means an increased chance for kelp forests to thrive, meaning more carbon sequestered and more oxygen for us. It is estimated that 70% of all oxygen on Earth comes from marine plants such as kelp, seaweed, and phytoplankton. Sea otters really are a keystone species. Just know that these guys are not only utterly adorable, but they're also unsung heroes in our fight against climate change.